Here is the voice of the working class, Rick Smith.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here today on the big program. Lots to get to, lots to talk about. Big day in Washington today. Budgets, priorities, the morality police. You know, the people who tell us how religious they are, how much their faith is important to them. Well, it looks like they have shown their hand and they have passed, what is this called? Hold on. The Limit, Save, and Grow Act, otherwise known as Let's Shoot the Hostages Act. Got through the House. It was a squeaker. 217 to 215, which means all the Democrats voted against it and 4 Republicans voted against it. It's interesting, the 4 that voted against it, though, they're the, Matt Gaetz, Ken Buck, Andy Biggs, that Burchett guy from Tennessee, the crazy caucus. Now, my mind goes into this place of, they got enough votes to pass it. They needed that. But those 4 were given the okay to, you're the crazy ones. You can be against it because we're gonna play this. Now, understand, this bill, it's going nowhere. This was we're going to pander to the radical base, and it's not even far enough for the radical base. I have to wonder, and I wonder when these bills come up, because we do a lot of these performative, posturing kind of bills. I have to wonder if it really mattered how many people would actually vote for it. I think you'd get like maybe 30 or 40 that would have voted for it, because it is that bad. It is that harmful. It is that dangerous. And again, when we talk about budgeting, and I love doing this with my religious folk, budgets are moral documents. It tells me what your priorities are. It tells me who you are without actually telling me who you are, because it lines up your priorities. For instance, remember, this is the party of compassion, the party of national security, the party of, hey, there's a photo up with a soldier and a flag. Let's get it. There's them. And yet, one of the things that this does is, and we've talked about this already, is just massive and painful cuts to the VA. Massive and painful cuts to the people that we put up on the pedestal and called heroes. 22% across the board they want. Right across the board. And what does that mean for our veterans? Wow. I mean, it means longer wait times for medical appointments for our soldiers. It means, what was it? Like 80,000 job cuts at the VA, they're saying. This kind of massive, massive cuts. Painful cuts. 81,000 jobs lost is what they're putting out. A 22% cut. And it means we're not going to have the people that we need to do the jobs that we have to ensure that people have the care that they need. Now, remember, the heroes that we care about. That we called them heroes. We stand at every sporting event. We raise the flag and we clap for them. Again, performative stuff. But when it comes to where the rubber meets the road, this is a priority. 22% cut to the VA? Are you flipping kidding me? Now, granny, they don't let you off the hook either. 22% cut to the Social Security Administration. And what does that mean? That means more layoffs in that administration. That means, sorry, you're not going to get processed as quickly. People who need disability benefits not going to get processed, and those are way behind. It means less service. It means less help. It means, starving our government. They want to slash food assistance programs. 1 million low-income seniors are going to go without food assistance. It means cuts to nursing home oversight. It just means all of the wrong things. But again, these are the people who tell us, no, we believe in family values. Going to have massive cuts at the border. They're saying if this goes through, 2,000 Customs and Border Patrol agents gone, 11,000 FBI personnel gone, hundreds of local law enforcement positions gone. But again, this is the party of law enforcement, law and order people. And go down the list of all of the things that will be torn apart. But I go back to the reality. The reality is they don't care about you and me. They don't care about working people. This is a performative display of them going after Biden. And Joe Biden saying, look, you spent the money. Increase the stupid limit. Why are you holding us hostage? I get people all the time going, yo, things were so much better under Trump. My 401k. Do you know what your 401k is going to look like if our Republican friends get their wet dream wish? Do you know what this country is going to struggle through because of this? And this is the part that it just infuriates me. Because there are people who go, no, they wouldn't let that happen. They're just negotiating. No, they're not. I said from the beginning, these folks truly want to shoot the message. They want to shoot the hostage. And I could spend all day going through just how bad this, again, what's the stupid name? Listen, save, and grow. I could spend all 2 hours going through how bad this is and how it's going to hurt families, it's going to hurt workers, it's going to hurt communities. And they don't care because they know most working people aren't paying attention. It's angering and it's frustrating. Let's quick go to the phones. I got Kurt from Akron on line 1. Kurt, how you doing today?
Hey, good evening, Rick, and thanks for your show. It's always informative and good. I have a question. Doesn't the 14th Amendment cover full faith and credit that basically we can't default on our debts based on the 14th Amendment?
Shh. Come on. No, you're not allowed to say that. Shh. This is a performative display.
So I'm right.
I believe that to be true, and I believe that the debt ceiling is idiotic and shouldn't be there. It's a construct to do just this. It's not about the things that they tell us about trying to rein in outrageous spending. The time when you rein in spending is before you spend it.
It's to pay the bills, like your credit. I hate to use a Joe McCarthy. I hate to use a Kevin McCarthy example. It's paying down the credit card that we have. That's what it is.
Yep.
And, like someone said today, this debt ceiling is 97% of everything that was before Joe Biden even became president, which is 25% of what Donald Trump racked up for 4 years over a 240-plus year experiment in what we call our representative democracy.
But again, this is, as I said, this is performative. This is about getting people to think it's all Biden's fault.
And also, I'll tell you this. McCarthy's looking at the fact that if we go off the fiscal cliff in June, that's going to be, 700,000 to 1 million jobs lost by the end of 2024? They're looking at that because, that's during the election. We can blame Joe Biden for that.
Yeah. Isn't that a shame?
They're looking ahead.
Isn't that a shame that in this day and age you have these politicians who it really is all about them. It's not about us. It's never about us.
Right. And you know how you cure this? I'm going to be dead serious honest how you'd cure this whole problem, because we never heard about debt ceilings during Eisenhower and Kennedy and all these people. You raise the top tax rate back up to 92%, like it should be.
I've been saying it for years. Dig up the good socialist president Dwight David Eisenhower. Then we don't have these problems.
Exactly, and then that's how you cure the debt problem, because we've never had, until Ronald Reagan, we've never heard of a debt ceiling.
Again, you create a crisis and then you use it to your advantage. Like they
and
say,
you know what? I think
never let a good crisis go to waste.
Rick, exactly, and I think, Rick, you need to write a book or a position paper of some kind and title it "They're Not the Solution to the Problem. They are the problem," meaning the current Republican Party.
There you go. Kurt, appreciate it, man.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Look, the reality is what it is, and they're showing their hand. This is major stuff. This is going to affect every working person in this country, and it's you. It's me. You know who doesn't get affected by this? the very well-to-do, the people, our billionaire class. This doesn't harm them. This hurts that single mother who needs Section 8 housing. This hurts that single mother, my mother, when I was a kid, to put food on the table, to keep a roof over the head. This is dangerous. This is just incredibly irresponsible. But that doesn't matter to them. What matters is they get to win. And that's the frustration of the moment that I have, because we aren't pushing back enough on this. This is something that should be uniting us. This should be something that should be bringing us together, going, look, stupid, you pay your bills. I say it all the time. I'm a fiscal conservative. I pay my bills. I'm judicious in how I spend my money, and I make sure that I pay my bills. I'm right now reaching out to my conservative friends. Explain to me how it is that you can justify going, yeah, we spent the money. We debated it. We allocated it. It's earmarked for what needs to be done. We've made commitments. We've done all this stuff. But now after it's there, we're now going to balk at paying for it? It's nuts. And again, what these Republicans don't want is exactly what Kurt said. They don't want to tax the very wealthy who have been getting away with robbing our bank for the last 40 years. The reason wages have been stagnant for 40 years, the reason healthcare costs so much, the reason our retirement security has been mugged is because, well, we've got to pay homage to the chair. We got to kiss the rings. When are we going to stop? Want to hear your thoughts? Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Got a lot to get to. This is another one of those moments where, seriously, we're going through this again? But what's different here is these Republicans, this group, this gang, they really do want to take the hostages out. That's you. That's me. That's us. Quick break. Right back.
We are AFGE, the American Federation of Government Employees. We represent 700,000 federal and D.C. government workers who are the vital threads of the fabric of American life. We support our nation's military. We take care of our nation's veterans. We protect our nation's borders. We respond to our nation's crises and natural disasters. We provide services to our nation's seniors. The American Federation of Government Employees. We work for America.
The phone lines are open. Give Rick a call at 1-866-416-RICK. That's 1-866-416-7425.
We are AFGE, the American Federation of Government Employees. We represent 700,000 federal and D.C. government workers who are the vital threads of the fabric of American life. We support our nation's military. We take care of our nation's veterans. We protect our nation's borders. We respond to our nation's crises and natural disasters. We provide services to our nation's seniors. The American Federation of Government Employees. We work for America.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So an interesting hearing today in the Senate on abortion. And again, this is one of those real hot topics that we're supposed to be divided by, where I think the mass of we the people, I think the majority of us, not the attention seekers and the political fundraisers, but the majority of the country, I believe, is right where I'm at, which is I'm not in favor of abortion, but I'm pro safety. I don't want people dying in back alleys. I want people to have opportunities to bring children into this world and want to. It shouldn't be the first club out of the bag, but I want my daughters to be safe first and foremost. And I think most people are that way. And I think people like Ted Cruz understand that, which is why every time I hear them lie, it drives me insane. And he did it today. One of his spiels he went on today was all about the lie. And we've heard this before, but I decided, we've got to play the lie. So here's Ted Cruz. One of the things that caught my attention that I just had to run out.
The current position of virtually every Democrat senator in this body is that abortion should be absolutely unlimited, available up until the moment of birth, and even, shockingly, in some instances, after birth. That partial birth abortion should be fully legal.
Fully legal. Oh, yeah. And he goes on into a whole bunch of other bits. But the part that I had to get to is that, they're a Democrat. Those Democrat, they want abortion to be up until the moment of birth. And you heard him say it, after. See, now that's a new one. That's a new little bit of caveat. Now, I've said this before. Now, my wife and I have 3 children. There were 3 times where we raced to the hospital, one of them at 100 miles an hour. Fortunately, statute of limitations is well past, so I can't be held accountable for that. But at no point did the doctor look up from the sheet and go, which way are we going with this? Seriously, I mean, this is what they want you to believe. They want you to believe that it's, anytime. It's anytime you want up until after now. After now. How far after? I got a 17-year-old. Sometimes he gets on my nerves. Can I go? Is that what you believe? This is how crazy it is. Now, the reality, when you go and you look it up and you actually use some facts, in 73, when the Supreme Court decided Roe versus Wade, the general consideration was before 24 weeks. Where I grew up in Ohio, it was before 20. Virtually every state has one of these. Now, what they are talking about these dangerous late-term scenarios where the child's not viable, going to die anyway, and is going to cause harm or death to the mother. What he's saying is, screw the mother. We're so ideological. We don't care about her. And what's interesting is a woman testified today from Texas, oddly enough. Her name was Amanda Zerwoski, I guess. Amanda was evidently has an incomplete cervix. Why I need to know that, I don't know. But evidently what can happen is it can rupture prematurely and it will cause late-term miscarriages. So as she's going through this misery, doctors don't know how to deal with her. I assume they would have aborted the child at that point to save her the misery. They had to wait until she was septic, and finally agreed that she was ill enough, that she was sick enough, that she was close enough to trouble that they could induce labor, and the child then passed away. They could have saved all this pre the Roberts Court. Could have saved this woman all this misery. And now she and a couple of others and a couple of doctors are suing Texas because you need to clarify, how are you going to care for these women and their needs in these moments of where moments matter? But again, it's not about that. It has nothing to do with, they don't care about you or me or Amanda or the child for that matter. It's about the politics. It's about the division. It's to keep us pitted against each other. There's no solutions here. Have you seen any of them come out and say, okay, well, we're going to force people to have children, but we're going to make sure that they get education. We're going to make sure they get fed. What we do know is North Dakota said, no, we're going to make you have a child no matter what, but no school lunch programs because that's not the state's responsibility. How freaking insane is it? And again, this isn't just the abortion issue. A listener sent me this Vice story that this Moms for Liberty group is organizing all around the country. And here in my backyard right now, they're attempting to take over my local school board, which would be the worst thing that my little fair borough could possibly do, was to bring lunatics into the school board. But that's what the Moms for Liberty people are doing. And because it's all about the gays and the trans and the books, got to protect the children. And this Vice article goes into a woman who was evidently, Southern Baptist, finds out her son's gay, at church, I guess, goes through all of the things that crazy religious people do around that issue, conversion therapy, counseling, all of that. But it wasn't until she's brought on by these zealots, by these parental terrorists, that she goes, almost off the deep end. Because this is one of I learned this years ago, and this is why this issue is kind of important. I'll say, a girl I dated years ago, her brother was gay, and his community embraced us. And I had an opportunity to speak with all of them, and they would tell their stories about how their parents disowned them, how a couple of them, their parents wished them dead, how a couple of times they were homeless and the parents drove by them on the streets. Just some of the worst kind of stories that you could hear that a parent would do to a child, and you go, how is that possible? What parent would do that to their child over that, or over anything? I mean, I cannot fathom. So part of me looks at these issues that don't affect me personally, but say, what if it is one of my children? What if it is someone that I care about that's being mistreated, like we're seeing all of these zealots demanding that it's their vision of what should be? What would you do with your child? I remember a guy good union guy, good neighbor, fantastic guy. We began talking about abortion, and one of the things is I've said where I'm always at. I'm pro-safety. And I said, well, what would you do if your daughter, had to go into the back alley to get an abortion and she died? And he said, this is where my mind just doesn't go. He said, I wouldn't shed a tear. I wouldn't shed a tear for her. How do you deal with those kind of cold and callous people who are doing the things that they're doing? Look, I've got problems around some of the trans issues. I've got problems around some of the things that are going on. But I come at it from a place of, what if that were my child? What if that were someone that I cared about? Would I treat them the same? And what's frustrating is, and I get these emails from people who are just some of the most vile stuff. I can't read on the air because FCC rules, and there isn't enough of it to clean up other than the hatred and the vitriol for people that they don't know. So I keep coming back to this moment. How do we deal in a society where our politicians are the ones who are heeding the rhetoric? Our politicians, the ones who are supposed to help us solve problems, are the ones that are creating more of them. How do we deal with a society where it's not about fixing things, it's about tearing things down and destroying things? It's about tearing us apart. As I say, for me, it's not about red hat or blue hat. It's about hard hat. It's about getting back to work, about moving forward, getting things done. But sadly, with leaders like Ted Cruz, right out and out lying, how do we move forward? Because there are people who believe Ted Cruz said it. A U.S. senator said it. And it's a flat out lie. I want to hear your thoughts. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1944. That was the day the Army National Guard seized the Chicago property of Montgomery Ward and removed its chairman, Sewell Avery. The Chicago-based company repeatedly refused to accept a National War Labor Board order to recognize the workers' union and abide by the board-negotiated collective bargaining agreements. After refusing the second board order, President Franklin Roosevelt ordered the Army National Guard to seize the company's central mail order house, retail store, and other related properties in the city. Avery was physically carried out of his office. Wartime no-strike pledges were in effect to avoid strikes or any disruption in war production. From a distance, it looked as if the president had triumphed the cause of labor in forcefully implementing the Wagner Act. Workers of the CIO United Mail Order Warehouse and Retail Employees Union had walked off the job over recognition issues on April 12th. Montgomery Ward officials argued again, as they had 2 years earlier, that they were not engaged in war production, held no government contracts, and that the dispute is not one which might impede the prosecution of the war by the board's own terms. But the government feared strike activity would only spread to other industries in Chicago and elsewhere. Local Teamsters and Railway Brotherhoods all supported the strike and refused to handle shipments to and from Ward facilities. The CIO union agreed to end the strike on the eve of the seizure. Others in the labor movement called FDR's move a hoax and a device to break strikes and get workers back on the job without any gains. Roosevelt issued a third seizure of Ward's facilities nationwide by the end of the year. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, and follow us on the Twitters at Labor History in 2.
Do you find it as charming as I do when some leisure-class corporate chieftain whines that America's working stiffs are a bunch of slackers? We're hearing that now from Wall Street plutocrats, grumping that employees no longer have that old nose-to-the-grindstone, yes-boss work ethic of old-school capitalism that has created such fabulous wealth. Of course, wealth for whom and work for what are at the root of today's questioning of the old culture and structure of work. But the grumpers don't want to hear that, so they simply carp that America has gone soft. The latest high-flying scolder is Stephen Ratner, the Wall Street huckster who was fined $6 million in 2010 for running a kickback scheme and banned from investment banking for 2 years. But now he's back in the financial hustle, feeling free to chastise you for what he sees as your lack of hustle on the job. In particular, Steve is peeved at you work-from-home people, asserting with no actual evidence that you're not really working. He claims it will inevitably lead to a lower standard of living, a standard he measures strictly in money, not quality of life. Indeed, he says that your life should be work, pointing with envy to China's 996 system, a grinding ethic of expecting people to work from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. 6 days a week. Then, Ratner offers a grand solution to dissuade work-from-home arrangements: housing. Why, he asks, have a big majority of European workers already returned to their offices? Simple, he says. Most people there live in small apartments and houses, making stay-at-home work less comfortable. Voila! Put America's workers in tiny houses and office space will fill up. This is Jim Hightower saying, see, life is simple if you view it from the heights of Wall Street. Thank you, Steve. Now, go away.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So for years, we've been talking about, just how biased our Supreme Court, under the leadership of Chief Justice John Roberts, has become. And look, because the vast majority of decisions we know go towards the corporate, toward the moneyed interest. And I've been saying, just for a long time that workers, all they want is a fair shake. We want a fair shake from our high court, and we're not getting it. So the question is, with all the recent disclosures around Clarence Thomas and Neil Gorsuch, and now you've got Chief Justice Roberts saying he's not going to come and testify in front of the Senate, how can working people get a fair shake when our court appears to be bought and paid for by the very wealthy? And that's why I've asked Rhode Island Senator Sheldon Whitehouse to come share some thoughts with us. Senator, thanks for taking time for us.
Good to be with you. Thanks for having me on.
So, this is where my mind starts. Let's start here, Senator. I mean, average everyday working people just want their court to be fair, want to get a fair shake in front of the court. How can we have a system where, our justices are being wined and dined and vacationed and flown around by the very wealthy and powerful when working people don't have that kind of access?
Well, the problem is that billionaires do have that kind of access, and they have been working it. Highly motivated billionaires, I should add, have been working it to exert control over the court in a whole variety of ways, from being in the background as that Federalist Society list was put together, to advising Trump on which judges he should pick off the list, to funding the ads for the nominees who were chosen, to sending flotillas of front groups into the court as what they call amici curiae, friends of the court, to write briefs telling the court what they want them to do. So the pattern of all of this overlays in a very unpleasant way with the pattern of billionaire influence and generosity and secrecy around the Thomas gifts.
Yeah. Now, just not too long ago, I think it was the Center for American Progress did a study of the cases before the court. And they found that whenever the Chamber of Commerce puts an amicus brief in, to your point, that they win more than 70% of the time, which is where I keep saying, our court seems to be so biased on the side of the moneyed interests. And look, this kind of stuff doesn't give the court any more credibility. And you would think, being, the high court of the land, the Supreme Court, that you would take that a little bit more seriously than what we're finding out.
I did a published report years ago that looked at the 5-4 decisions of the court, where the 5-4 broke along partisan lines. And in virtually every one of them, there was a very obvious right-wing, big Republican donor interest in the case. And so we dug in a little bit further and looked at the outcomes. And of the, I think it was 73 cases that were 5-4 partisan and had a big right-wing donor interest implicated, the score was 73-0.
Wow. 73-0?
73-0. Every single 5-4 partisan case with an identifiable right-wing interest in it went for the identifiable right-wing interest.
So this just goes back and solidifies my view that working people don't have a chance. Because one of the things I talk about all the time here, I fear this court is moving us back into the direction of the Lochner era, where there are no laws that can protect working people, no minimum wage laws, no maximum hour laws, no safe working condition laws, none of that stuff, that we end up back in kind of an oligarch-run country where the court is no friend to working people. So I'm listening to you say this, and man, we're steamrolling towards that.
I think the record of the court gives plenty of evidence for your thesis, and it only got worse when they went from 5-4 to 6-3, and whatever moderating effect Justice Roberts could claim to have was evaporated by him no longer being essential to a majority.
That's an interesting question. What's this going to mean to the Roberts? Because Roberts is a guy that I think legacy matters to him. This is going to tarnish his legacy for I think forever. I think this is going to be what his legacy will be, just how corrupt they appear.
Yeah, my take has been that Roberts will do whatever the big donors expect and want, up to a point where the move is so sudden, so dramatic, so drastic that it risks damaging the reputation of the court. Thomas and Alito are just like him up to that last point, but they don't care very much about the reputation of the court. They just want to get the job done for the donors that put them there.
What do you say? What do you say, Senator? I had a bunch of people tell me that the whole system's corrupt. It's all bad. This isn't just them. I'm making much ado about nothing. How much of this is? This is just how the game has always been played, or are we taking this in the wrong direction?
Well, I would say, first of all, I think dark money has completely rotted out Congress on issues that are important to the big dark money donors. So there are issues in which, I think some general skepticism about Congress and politics is appropriate. And the problem with that is that, members of Congress have been corrupt forever. Special interests have had improper influence forever. But the court has usually been exempt from that. The court has often been a check on that kind of behavior. And what you've seen recently from the Roberts Court is they've completely thrown in with the anti-democratic, oligarchic, Republican big money forces in case after case after case. And that's what's discouraging to me, because The court's supposed to be the place where you get a fair shake. And also, the court's really hard to repair if it's gone bad because it's protected from political influence without any exemption for political influence that's designed to clean the place up.
Right. Now, do you have any faith in John Roberts that he's going to conduct an investigation and that we get to the bottom or any resolution to this? Because I don't. I look at what happened with the Alito leaked document. I have very little faith in this institution, and I think a lot of working people share my skepticism. Do you have any faith that he'll do it? And if he doesn't, you as part of the Judiciary Committee, what are you guys going to do?
I asked him to undertake an investigation of the Thomas incident, and he referred it to the Judicial Conference, which is other federal judges. He's the only Supreme Court justice in the group, who then referred it to their Financial Disclosure Committee. And what's weird about that is that 11 years ago, a similar set of concerns were raised about gifts by Harlan Crow of yacht travel and jet travel to Justice Thomas. And they went also to the Judicial Conference and from it to the Financial Disclosure Committee. And we have so far been able to determine no sign of there ever having been any outcome or decision.
So what you're telling me is don't have any faith in whatever investigation comes out of this. So which means that you as a legislator...
We need to look at that. We need to find out what happened. And if this is going to be if nothing happened and the investigation just got buried in the Financial Disclosure Committee, and now the second investigation has gone to the same place, then we need an understanding of how that works, what goes on, and who's pulling strings.
Now, I understand you guys are going to have a hearing on June 2nd that Roberts was invited to.
May 2nd, yeah.
What are we expecting to come out of this? What are we hoping for?
Well, Roberts has declined to attend, so we have a panel of experts on judicial ethics who will come in and share their views. I expect what is likely to come out of it is the obvious. They will confirm that if you have a code of judicial ethics and a bunch of ethics statutes that the justices are nominally bound by, but there's no ref to blow the whistle if they break the rules, they're going to figure that out pretty soon, and they're going to come up with some pretty eccentric views of what the rules and the statutes say, and it's very hard to work through that problem, and that will help build the case, I think, for a statutory code of ethics for the Supreme Court with a statutory method of inquiry, examination, determination, and enforcement.
You're listening to the Rick Smith Show. We're here with Rhode Island Senator Sheldon Whitehouse. If you want to check out his website, we'll get links out at the social media how you can do that. I got a question. Ed Markey, senator from Massachusetts, called for Thomas's resignation. Are we on board with that? I mean, is there any way that this, rises to the level of him being ousted? Because I got a lot of my left friends going, we need to impeach. We need to do all this thing. He's going to go. I don't see that happening, but I'm curious if you have any thoughts.
Yeah, I'm trying to operate in the world of the possible, given that we have a House controlled by the Republicans who are in turn controlled by the same donors who put these judges on the court. So there's not going to be an impeachment under Speaker McCarthy. And, we couldn't get votes to convict on an impeachment against Donald Trump. After all, he did set aside Clarence Thomas over this. So I don't think whether it's merited is a separate question. Impeachment is simply not feasible. I think that the way we're going to make progress here is by continuing to put a harsh spotlight on the uniquely peculiar misbehavior of the Supreme Court and provoke the other federal judges who are not on the Supreme Court, who have to abide by the Code of Ethics, who are subject to investigation and review if there are allegations against them, to get them to the point where they say, okay, enough, you guys, we're not going to put up with this any longer. And the pressure will come from inside the judiciary.
So you think they're going to police themselves? I'm not a big fan of policing themselves. I think there has to be some legislation. If they're not going to oversee themselves and be able to do it, there's got to be something that puts them in this place, which is, brings us to the legislation that you're moving on.
I've got the bill for that.
This Supreme Court Ethics, Recusal, and Transparency Act, SCERT Act. I don't know why we don't already have something like this in place, but tell me about it.
Well, we've always trusted the Supreme Court to police itself, and there have not been instances of misbehavior of this variety in memory. Justice Fortas was involved in far less troubling circumstances and resigned from the court. But these guys don't want to resign. They're on a mission, so we have to deal with them. And the bill would set up they'd have to adopt code of ethics. They'd have to set up rules of procedure for having themselves investigated by investigators and by, like staff attorneys who do it in the lower courts. There'd have to be a determination. Other judges would make the determination, so it stays within the judicial branch. And then they'd also have to clean up with respect to gifts and hospitality. They'd have to clean up about recusing themselves from cases, and they'd have to require better disclosure of these amici curiae, the friends of court briefs, where the billionaires send in front groups who they funded to tell the judges what to do, and the justices, I should say, and the justices don't bother to inquire who's funding the front groups. They just allow this whole charade to continue.
Yeah, for me, you're going through this again, and it all comes back down to the money, doesn't it? It comes back down to all of this money that we've given a handful of people, which I then come back to where I'm usually at on these issues is it's time we start taxing these people and using that money in a much more productive way to ensure that not just our institutions are sound, but our country's sound. It just sounds like this is a tax the rich moment for me as well.
Yeah, and the role of huge amounts of money in all this. I've described it as a noxious cocktail of creepy billionaires, phony front groups, dark money millions, amenable justices, and secrecy. That is not a good combination really anywhere, and it's certainly not a good combination in a court. And the problem is that a vicious cycle has developed in which those forces take over the court, and then the court supports creepy billionaires, phony front groups, dark money millionaires, and secrecy. And that cycle has to be broken and reversed.
See, for me, this is a moment where, I don't care which hat you've got on. I don't care if it's a red hat or a blue hat. I'm going to steal Rupert Murdoch's line. It's not about red or blue. It's about green. This is something that should unite all of us across party lines, because having a Supreme Court that is, less than supreme and not above suspicion of impropriety is not good for the country. This should be something universally across party lines. We want to make sure that is cleaned up and made, I guess, wholesome again.
Yeah, and I think it's a tell when it's not just elected politicians talking about it, but when it becomes more of a topic among other judges. And what I'm hearing is that it has become a topic among other judges, and they're really quite sick of what they're being obliged to have to swallow from the Supreme Court.
Because it makes them look bad too, I would think. I mean, it makes the whole system look bad.
Yeah, it makes the whole system look bad, particularly when the excuse of the Supreme Court is, we're not breaking any rules here. This is the way the rules are. We're living within them. And regular judges look at that and say, that's ridiculous. That is completely not true. If you were actually subject to enforcement of the rules, you'd know that wasn't true, because we couldn't get away with this. There aren't circuit court of appeals judges taking $500,000 vacations from billionaires. They aren't circuit court of appeals judges rigging the rules so that they can ask the owner of a resort for a vacation and then take it and keep it secret as personal hospitality because the owner of the resort invited them personally, even if they don't know the person. stuff like that. There's just no way that's credible in any other court.
No, and here's the thing, and maybe it's just because I'm getting older. I'm old enough to remember when this was wrong. I'm old enough to remember when this would have been something that would have outraged everyone until someone had to resign. I'm old enough to remember.
Like Abe Fortas did.
Yeah, I'm old enough to remember that this is something that we shouldn't want, and not something that's based on politics, right or left, but right or wrong. And this is wrong to me. It smells of wrong in every way. So the last line of questioning I've got for you is, how do we pull people around to remembering that this is wrong? Take off the red hat, take off the blue hat. This is about the green, to steal from Rupert.
Yeah, I think constant exposure to the facts of what is going on is really important. I think Roberts and the Federal Society of Justices on the court are hoping for the next big news cycle to blow this away, and they can go back to previous ways of doing business. The last episode in which Clarence Thomas didn't report his wife's income from the right-wing front group, the Heritage Foundation, was back in 2011. And here we are in 2022.
Yeah.
Back then, he was accused of taking gifts of yacht travel and jet travel from Harlan Crow. Here we are in 2022 having to relive it. So I think this time we just need to stick with it and make sure we don't let it get away from us, and keep the pressure on and hope and pray that either a glimmer of conscience in Chief Justice Roberts or pressure from the rest of the bench gets a cleanup.
Yeah, but here's the thing, and this is where we'll finish this. Average working people like me, average people listening to this program know that if you lie on a form, there's consequences. If you do the kind of things that he's being accused of, there are consequences, and sadly, there will be no consequences for Clarence Thomas other than a black check on his record down the line. That's what I think. That's what infuriates me, Senator.
Yeah, well, I think for a lot of people who are state and local employees as well, I was on a phone call and a caller said that she was I think a state employee, maybe a local municipal employee in West Virginia, and she had to report when she went out someplace and they served lunch, and it was like a $5 lunch, and she had to go through all these reports about the $5 lunch that she got, and here's a guy who's taking yacht trips and private jet trips, and having his mom put up rent-free in a house that a billionaire owns. The whole thing is just unacceptable to regular people.
I'm right there with you. Senator, I appreciate the time. I look forward to the hearing on the 2nd. I hope you'll come back and keep us up to date on how this is going down the road.
Will do. Gladly, Rick. Thanks for the attention to this.
Thank you so much, Senator. Senator Sheldon Whitehouse, whitehouse.senate.gov, the website, if you want to take a look at the work that he's doing. Going to take a quick break. Right back after this. Stick around. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1975. That was the day the AFL-CIO held a Jobs Now rally in Washington, D.C. A painful recession had pushed unemployment in the U.S. to 9%. Many workers across the nation thought the Ford administration was not doing enough to address the needs of working families. 60,000 people, many of them union members carrying banners representing their unions, gathered in RFK Stadium. There they heard speeches, including one from Senator Hubert H. Humphrey, who had served as vice president under Lyndon B. Johnson. His speech described the devastating impact of unemployment. Senator Humphrey said, "Our nation must recommit itself to the goal and the promise of full employment, a job for every American who is willing and able to work. Perhaps we would get bolder action and more compassion from this administration if some of its top advisors had a little taste of unemployment themselves. Perhaps they would know what unemployment is. It's drawing your last unemployment check with no job in sight. It's sitting in the dark to save on the light bill. It's making shoes last another month and driving on bald tires. It's eating a little less so the kids can eat a little more. It's facing eviction because you can't pay the rent or meet the mortgage. It's borrowing from your brother-in-law or letting your insurance lapse. It's facing yourself in the mirror and asking why and how much longer. It's wondering how a nation this rich, this enterprising, this great can let more than 8 million Americans who want to work and need to work go without work. Some protesters rushed the stage at the rally, causing it to end early. But his questions still remain. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter at laborhistoryin2.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
You know, I look at this, and the angering part of all this is they do it right out in public, right out in front of us. And I've been screaming about this for years. I mean, Senator Whitehouse brought up the fact that, you know, back in 2011, you had, I think it was on 60 Minutes, actually, that Clarence Thomas was talking about all the gifts that he had gotten and all, you know, driving his big RV and the money for Ginny to go work at the Heritage Foundation and do all the Tea Party stuff she did. Because, hey, you know, access to a sitting U.S. Supreme Court justice gets you kind of a high-paying gig. But it's even more than that. I mean, it's not just Thomas. Understand, it's all of them. It was, what did the one Times report say? Scalia took more than 250 subsidized trips. In fact, the one he died on, where he died, he was on one of these subsidized trips. He was on a hunting ranch owned by some guy named Poindexter. And you go, why? Now, Scalia used to whine all the time that he believed he was underpaid. But I guess you throw in the perks, you know. Stephen Breyer, they say, took more than 225 subsidized trips from 2004 to 2018. And look, the numbers are all there. This isn't, it's what they've been doing for a while. But it's gotten really just completely out of hand. And one of the things that the Times pointed out is that they hold these black tie events and they trot these justices around and, you know, to get access to them. And they hold an annual black tie dinner where the ticket is at least $5,000 to get in. How many working people got $5,000 to go to a rubber chicken dinner? How many? None that I know of. These are the rich and powerful. These are the special interests that we now have a historical court, a Supreme Court Historical Society that raised last year, according to the Times, $6.4 million from special interests and groups that have business in front of the court. Because why else would you go other than to get that 5 minutes to talk with the justice? You know, hey, you know, my guy, you know. I go back to what I said before. I've had friends who have served in Congress. They all tell me the same thing. No one's ever bought my vote, but they buy my ear 15 minutes at a time to lobby their issue. So when I call them and ask for money, they go, yeah, I'll give you money, but I got this problem. And to get the money, you got to listen to the problem. And eventually you come around to their way of thinking. Because if you don't help them with their problem, guess what happens? No more money. And this is where money in politics is the problem. And the sooner that we wake up to that reality and rein that in, especially from all of these right-wing think tanks and these front groups, and look, there's a little bit of that on the left too. I'm not naive to that fact, but the right does it so much better. The corporate interests do it so much better because they've got so much more money. I know George Soros, but for every George Soros, there's 20 right-wing billionaires who are funding, you know, for the love of dogs and puppies. And it's got to stop. That's why I'm glad to see someone like Sheldon Whitehouse out there fighting the good fight. Want to hear your thoughts? Email me, Rick at thericksmithshow.com.
Environmental Protection Agency will call for restrictions on all future and existing power plants that run on coal or natural gas.
Biden EPA to launch new landmark effort to limit carbon pollution.
Climate change isn't a future problem, it is a current problem.
Earth hits grim new records for global ice loss and rising seas. Plus,
environmental justice will become the responsibility of every single federal agency. I mean, every single federal agency.
President Biden boosts environmental justice.
All of those boosts and more straight ahead from BradVlog.com. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
Will we step up to our ambitions? Will we stand together to meet the great challenges we have? Will we preserve our planet for future generations?
No, I don't think so. This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, big news from the EPA this week.
Oh, yes, indeed. As we go to air, the Environmental Protection Agency is on the verge of proposing new rules requiring the nation's power plants to cut their carbon emissions.
How quickly can the Republicans write a lawsuit against that?
Oh, instantly.
Yeah.
It matters because electricity from coal and natural gas-fired power plants is the second largest source of greenhouse gas emissions in the U.S. after transportation. If adopted, the new draft pollution standards would require utility companies to capture nearly all carbon emissions from their smokestacks by 2040, leaving the companies to determine how, either by switching to clean renewable sources like wind and solar, or by using costly new technology to capture emissions from their smokestacks.
Or by filing a lawsuit.
No commercial power plants in the United States use carbon capture technology right now, and the new rules are expected to trigger an immediate challenge from Republican-controlled states in the Supreme Court, which blocked a previous Obama-era effort.
Of course.
Meanwhile, the Earth broke grim new records for melting glaciers, rising sea levels, and ocean warming in 2022, caused primarily by the burning of fossil fuels. The World Meteorological Organization's annual State of the Global Climate Report, released on Earth Day, confirms that the past 8 years were the hottest 8 years in the instrumental record. Last year, the oceans hit a new all-time record high for heat content. Antarctic sea ice fell to its lowest extent on record. 60% of the ocean surface saw at least one marine heat wave. Average global sea levels also reached record highs, and the rate of sea level rise itself has doubled since 1993. Additional evidence that man-made climate change is accelerating. The report also found, quote, off-the-charts melting of the world's glaciers, and that matters for millions of people around the world who rely on glacier meltwater for drinking water and food production.
Off the charts melting.
Yep. Here in the U.S., about 1 in 3 people in the United States breathe polluted air that harms their health and shortens their lives. And it's primarily from gas-powered vehicles and industrial plants. That's according to the American Lung Association's annual State of the Air report, which found that increasing wildfires, drought, and inequality have stalled improving air quality efforts, with low-income and communities of color disproportionately affected.
It also found that House Speaker Kevin McCarthy's hometown of Bakersfield is the most polluted city in the entire United States.
Yep, and McCarthy has proposed repealing clean energy provisions in the Inflation Reduction Act climate law. But the vast majority of Americans support federal government action to address climate change. According to new Pew Research data, 70% of Americans want the government to prioritize renewable energy sources like wind and solar over expanding production of fossil fuels. But there's a deep partisan divide. 80% of Democrats consider climate change a major threat. Only 23% of Republicans do.
Lucky they got gerrymandering.
President Biden criticized McCarthy and Republicans when he signed an executive order creating the Office of Environmental Justice in the White House to ensure that poverty, race, and ethnic status do not lead to worse exposure to pollution and environmental harm.
Nice.
Environmental justice will be the mission of the entire government, woven directly into how we work with state, local, tribal, and territorial governments. This is an order that directs the federal agencies to address gaps in science and technology.
Nice. About time.
And finally, the U.S. Supreme Court on Monday rejected an attempt by Big Oil to delay climate liability lawsuits brought by U.S. cities and states trying to hold oil companies accountable for costly damages caused by man-made climate change. Big Oil was trying to move the cases to friendlier federal courts, but the Supreme Court declined to bail them out on that.
Nice. Are you okay, Supreme Court? For much more on all of these stories and the ones we couldn't get to today, check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. Find, follow, and share us planet-wide on the Facebooks, Twitters, and Mastodons at Green News Report.
Are you tired of think tank-approved corporate news and commentary? Are you tired of CEOs telling you what to think, who to hate, and who to vote for? Well, welcome to the Rick Smith Show. We don't take orders from some boardroom, and we don't do focus groups or talking points. We don't work for them, and we never will. I'm Rick Smith, and I work for you. Join us daily at thericksmithshow.com and download the podcast and never miss a minute.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So recently we had AFSCME President Lee Saunders on the program to talk about the sanitation strike, the 1968 sanitation strike in Memphis, and the importance of workers realizing their power and organizing. And look, they're throughout every generation, and I've said this numerous times, every generation has to rediscover what solidarity means to them, find its voice, find its power. And I hope we're living through one of those moments right now that historians are going to look back on and go, hey, this was important. Finding workers finding their power. The question is what lies ahead, and before we can live in the future, we got to look to the past, and that's always helpful. And here to talk about his hot off the presses new book, Under the Iron Heel, The Wobblies and the Capitalists' War on Radical Workers. I've asked Ahmad White to come talk with us. He's a professor of law at the University of Colorado Boulder. Professor, thanks for taking time for us.
Oh, thank you for having me.
So why did we write this book? This is not something that a lot of people think back to, the Wobblies, the IWW, the industrial workers of the world. Not a topic a lot of people get into. What made you write the book?
Oh, there are a number of reasons. I had a longstanding interest in the IWW going back about, 20 years or so. I would say the most outstanding reason I wrote the book was, as one of my close colleagues put it, to pay tribute to these people and to what they tried to accomplish and to what they endured, and to give some testament to their experiences, which I think are well worth being remembered.
Yeah, the short memory that I have of the IWW is the slogan, an injury to one being an injury to all, and the idea of one big union that everyone's in, skilled workers, unskilled workers, white, black, male, female, all of that. And also the 1912 Bread and Roses strike, the textile strike up in Lawrence, Massachusetts, in that area. Those are the two things that pop out. Does that seem about right?
Yeah, that's right. You remember some of the most essential things about this extremely important organization in American history. The Wobblies, as they were universally called, the members of the IWW, founded their union for an explicitly revolutionary purpose in the summer of 1905, and for about 20 years thereafter, they captivated much of the nation, the working class. Many people embraced them. Hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people supported the union. Hundreds of thousands joined it. And on the other side of that, many people in the ruling class came to despise this organization, and they set out to destroy it.
Yeah, and look, you had the kind of inequality that I would argue we're suffering through today. The jobs obviously were much more difficult back then. The laws hadn't been in place. People were working 12 sun up to sundown schedules, 6-7 days a week, brutal conditions, a much more brutal era. But people saying enough is enough already. And I see us in kind of the same kind of environment now, where workers have been exploited for far too long, and a lot of people are raising their head going, enough is enough.
That's right. That's one of the many lessons of this story about the IWW and what happened to it 100 years ago is a lesson about determination, about courage and resolve, and the importance of that in challenging the kinds of working conditions that workers all over the world have always faced. Yes, things were very bad at the time the IWW was formed. That's one reason the union was established. And you're right, they're not as bad today, but there's still tremendous inequality in this country. There's still tremendous exploitation, tremendous alienation, insecurity, things like that. And what the Wobblies tried to do and what they endured are important lessons for workers and their supporters today.
Now you saw a lot of organizing coming together, but you also back then you had a lot more, a lot of capital pushback. There were a lot of beatings, a lot of violence, and a lot of using the state as corporate militias, corporate police, if you will, to beat down some of these organizing drives. Any lessons that we should be learning today? As we see some of the legislation, some of the laws may be changing in one way or another, anything that you see similar between the eras?
I think one of the most important lessons to learn from the IWW is actually a skepticism about the state. When the union was formed, its founders forecast that in short order they would find themselves under the iron heel. The topic, the iron heel, being the title of a very famous, at the time, very popular novel by Jack London.
Right.
The union's members, Jack London himself, forecast that these people who set out to topple capitalism, to create a workers' commonwealth, would be repressed. And at the center of that campaign of repression would be the state. And so the IWW, from the outset, was very, very, very skeptical about the state. And that was one thing that separated them from other major currents of leftism and labor organizing in the early 20th century. The mainstream of the Socialist Party, much of the established labor union movement, trade union movement, as well as the communist movement when that emerged in 1990. The IWW had a very different view of the state. And I think that's something worth thinking about nowadays, even if you don't go as far as the IWW did,
right,
in rejecting the state in its entirety as a means of reforming the condition of labor or bringing about revolution. I don't think you have to go that far. You might want to, but I don't think you have to go that far to take from this union an important lesson in who controls the state and what the state is liable to do to people who trample on or attempt to compromise the interest of powerful people.
And it's not hard to understand why they thought that way. I mean, if you looked at what happened to the Knights of Labor, just a few years before, they were basically crushed by the state.
That's right. And it's not a coincidence that some of the founding members of the IWW had experience in the Knights of Labor. Others were veterans of the Western Federation of Miners, an organization of so-called hard rock miners in the western reaches of the United States that had fought labor wars all over the West. So it's not a coincidence that the primary leader of the IWW in its first 20 years of existence or so was a familiar person to some people, William Big Bill Hayward, who was an official in the Western Federation of Miners when he called to order the convention in Chicago in the summer of 1905 that established the Industrial Workers of the World.
No, I mean, for me, as someone who has a libertarian bent, and I think this is something that, a lot of my, whatever side of the aisle you're on politically, the libertarian streak in us says, I don't want the state, dictating how we have to negotiate. I've always been of the mindset that we win things at the bargaining table. We fight for better wages, hours, conditions, and we enforce them ourselves, and we hold on to those because those things that we fight for, we're not so easy to give up on. And I think that's really been the lesson of the last 50, 60 years is all those fights, Knights of Labor, IWW, CIO forward. those things have been easy to give up because there have been a couple of generations who have been detached from it and didn't have to fight for it, which is why you hear, well, those unions are something we needed 100 years ago, when the reality is workers are getting cheated today.
Well, that's right. And again, another lesson related to some things we've talked about that can be drawn from the IWW's experience and its counsel to workers is how unreliable these legal reforms mediated by the state, administered by the state can be. I think in some ways, the whole history of the modern labor movement in the United States is a confirmation of that. That how many workers now and workers' allies have come to understand that by bitter experience, the frustrations of dealing with the National Labor Relations Act and the way, yes, it gives workers or protects workers' rights to form unions, to engage in strikes and all of that, but it also limits all of those things.
No, it's an excellent point. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're with Ahmed White. He's a professor of law at the University of Colorado Boulder, also the author of Under the Iron Heel, The Wobblies and the Capitalist War on Radical Workers. This is one of these moments where you look at just what you brought up. The National Labor Relations Act, I believe, was a peace treaty to get, these kind of activist workers out of the streets and back into the negotiating table, which I'm not opposed to. But like you said, things drifted away. And I find it interesting that, the founding of the IWW is the same year of the New York Bake Shop Act that began moving us, eventually toward the Lochner era, where we couldn't use those laws anymore. So for me, there's some parallel there. Or do you think I'm just reaching for something here? Because there seems something there to me.
No, there's something very important there, and it's to do with the interesting role, the tragic role that progressivism played in the demise of the IWW and the repression of it. And it's one of the themes in the book that even though there were some progressives who supported the IWW, at least supported its right to exist and help defend its members against the vicious repression that they faced, progressives were also at the center of this campaign to destroy the IWW. At the same time that they were leading an effort that I think ultimately culminated with the National Labor Relations Act and the New Deal period to reform the world of work, to institute legal reforms that would make the workplace essentially better in some ways without ever challenging the basic structures of power and control in American society and in the American workplace. So the Wobblies' history and the history of the destruction of the union in the 19-teens and 1920s is entwined with the rise of progressivism and the rise of reformism.
An interesting book. I hope folks will take a look at it. Under the Iron Heel, The Wobblies and the Capitalist War on Radical Workers. We'll get links out on social media, how you can pick that up. Powell's Books, most certainly a place you can go. You can also go to ahmadwhite.org. We'll get links out on that as well. So last line of questioning I've got for you. After writing this book, what are you hoping people take from it? When working people read this, what's the message that you want them to take away from?
I suppose the most important thing that one can take from it is a sense of pride. If you are a worker, if you're part of the labor movement, if you're a person of the left, this to me was a tremendous story of resolution, of determination and courage, of audacity, and of workers standing up for themselves. And I think, especially if one is a worker or a unionist, leftist, there is something here worth reading about and an opportunity to see in what happened to these people 100 years ago, a broader affirmation of unions, of workers, of the central aims of the American left.
Or just of working people wanting a better future for themselves and their families. For me, it's that story of striving to have better, families, better communities, better opportunities. All of that seems to play into this for me. And in reading through some of it, I identify with a good bit of what they were moving forward to. And I hope folks will take a look at it and maybe some of the ideas will spring forward and help us move forward as well.
I hope so.
Ahmed White, I appreciate you taking time for us. Thanks so much. The book, Under the Iron Heel, The Wobblies and the Capitalists' War on Radical Workers. Again, we'll get links out on social media how you can take a look at that. Ahmed, I appreciate the time.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Going to take a quick break. Want to get your thoughts? Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Back after this. Stick around.
We are AFGE, the American Federation of Government Employees. We represent 700,000 federal and D.C. government workers who are the vital threads of the fabric of American life. We support our nation's military. We take care of our nation's veterans. We protect our nation's borders. We respond to our nation's crises and natural disasters. We provide services to our nation's seniors. The American Federation of Government Employees. We work for America.
The phone lines are open. Give Rick a call at 1-866-416-RICK. That's 1-866-416-7425.
We are AFGE, the American Federation of Government Employees. We represent 700,000 federal and D.C. government workers who are the vital threads of the fabric of American life. We support our nation's military. We take care of our nation's veterans. We protect our nation's borders. We respond to our nation's crises and natural disasters. We provide services to our nation's seniors. The American Federation of Government Employees. We work for America.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
I like these books talking about labor's past, because I think the more we learn from the struggles of the past, the easier the future will be. And it drives me crazy when people go, no, we don't need those stinking unions. That was something we needed 100 years ago. Yeah, I needed them 100 years ago. Absolutely right. And you need them again. It seems simple to me. Which is why it's interesting. I got an email from Brenda, listening on WIOO 97.9 in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, asked quite pointedly, why would anyone join a union? And this is what blows my mind. I don't know why anyone would ask that question. I mean, the simple answers are, well, collective bargaining agreements that get you better wages, hours, conditions, higher salaries, better benefits, that kind of stuff. Job security, the end of at-will employment. You have to be fired for cause. There has to be a reason for you to lose your job. Seniority rights, that kind of stuff. But also safer working conditions. But for me, it's that empowerment, that sense that you have a say in the destination of your life, that you can that your voice matters. But I appreciate the email, Brenda, and I don't understand why you would ask the question, but I'm glad you did. Let's go to the phones. Got Alice on one. Alice, how are you?
I'm insane.
Okay.
So, yeah, nothing new about that. You were saying at the beginning of the show, talking about Ted Cruz and his pushing lies and propaganda about abortion. And the thing that really gets me is, these are supposed to be, and you'll notice I said supposed, to be educated people. And they are fulfilling being public servants. And they're also telling us over and over about how they love Jesus, and, it's all about Christianity and those 10 commandments. And if I recall correctly, one of them is about you're not supposed to lie. But yet, they seem to think nothing about lying, because we all know that we don't do abortions after a child is born, because that wouldn't be an abortion, that would be murder.
Yeah, but again, they understand. Ted Cruz knows what the law is. Ted Cruz knows exactly what he's doing. Just, as I've said before, is it worse that someone knows that they're lying to you or actually truly believes it? I think Ted Cruz is one of the worst people on the planet because I know he knows better. But he does it because this is about, as you said, the Ten Commandments. There's a couple of them he's breaking there. The bearing false witness and the idolatry, the worshiping of money, because this really is about wealth and power. This is about campaign cash. This is about keeping him in the power position. He doesn't believe this stuff, but it's good rhetoric to inflame the poorly educated.
Well, it is. And, it really bothers me that, and ignorance abounds. All these people going, well, the heartbeat bill, 6 weeks. Well, riddle me this. How can you have a heartbeat when a heart in a fetus does not form until around the 5th month? So, it just shows how uneducated apparently the entire Republican Party is. But there's nothing new about that. They're right on my list along with West Virginia. But, we'll not go there. Have a good evening, Rick.
Thank you, Alice. I appreciate it. No, and look, this again is my problem of the moment that we're in. None of this is about solutions. Understand this. It's not about solutions. It's not about fixing things. It's not about moving forward. It's about continuing the fight and the struggle to keep us apart so that they can continue to move what their real agenda is. And the real agenda, and this isn't conspiratorial, it just is. It's more for the rich and powerful, more money, more wealth, more power, more all of that, and less for you and me. And the thing that they dance in front of us every chance they get to keep us distracted from the fact that enormous amounts of wealth have been stolen from the working class of this country is this stupid stuff. I had someone ask me, why I care. I go, I don't. I mean, this is the problem. I really don't care about these issues. Honestly, I mean, the same-sex marriage doesn't matter to me. It doesn't affect my life at all. But someday I may know somebody, and that matters. I grew up in a time, and I guess this just means being Gen X. I grew up in a time where, don't worry about me, worry about yourself. You minded your own business. As long as it doesn't cost me anything. I had someone say, well, will you use pronouns? I go, no, I'm not going to put pronouns in my signature. If you can't tell I'm a man, well, that's on you. But if someone tells me, hey, I go by this pronoun, I'm going to try. I'm going to try and use whatever pronoun they want, whatever name they want, because it's respectful. It's being decent. And the sad reality is that whole thing that our parents taught us, or at least my mother taught me, was to be decent, to be respectful. That golden rule. Treat others as you'd want them to treat you, or, the silver one. Treat them as poorly as you would want them to treat you as poorly. But we've got a whole political class right now hell-bent on, again, keeping us enraged at each other. On any topic. It's life or death. And with social media, the trolling most of it is just, I don't think people who actually understand or care about the issue, it's just about making someone else as miserable as they are. This is why I believe in face-to-face conversations. I get vile stuff from people via email, via social media, vile stuff. Stuff I know if I took to their mother and said, do you know your child wrote this? The mother would have washed their mouth out with soap. At least my mother would have. But we're not that society anymore. And it's because we've got bad leaders. It's hard to believe that someone like Sheldon Whitehouse, a good, decent man, is in the same institution as Ted Cruz. Hard for me to believe. And the reality is, I look at Cruz, Ivy League educated, brilliant guy. I guess he's argued before the Supreme Court. He's at the top of the heap, credential wise. Spreading lies and misinformation for political gain. He's a huckster. He's in the same world as someone like Trump. And until we, you, me, us, put down this nonsense, we're going to continue to get ripped off. And nothing for us gets done. Issue after issue. There are solutions. There are solutions, and I believe we can find them. The problem is the other side, they don't want solutions. They want division. They want destruction. They want anger. They want animosity. They want us to keep the red hats and the blue hats on. They want us buying their T-shirts and their bull. Time for us to stop. Almost swore there. Quick break, right back. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1975. That was the day the AFL-CIO held a Jobs Now rally in Washington, D.C. A painful recession had pushed unemployment in the U.S. to 9%. Many workers across the nation thought the Ford administration was not doing enough to address the needs of working families. 60,000 people, many of them union members carrying banners representing their unions, gathered in RFK Stadium. There they heard speeches, including one from Senator Hubert H. Humphrey, who had served as vice president under Lyndon B. Johnson. His speech described the devastating impact of unemployment. Senator Humphrey said, "Our nation must recommit itself to the goal and the promise of full employment, a job for every American who is willing and able to work. Perhaps we would get bolder action and more compassion from this administration if some of its top advisors had a little taste of unemployment themselves. Perhaps they would know what unemployment is. It's drawing your last unemployment check with no job in sight. It's sitting in the dark to save on the light bill. It's making shoes last another month and driving on bald tires. It's eating a little less so the kids can eat a little more. It's facing eviction because you can't pay the rent or meet the mortgage. It's borrowing from your brother-in-law or letting your insurance lapse. It's facing yourself in the mirror and asking why and how much longer. It's wondering how a nation this rich, this enterprising, this great can let more than 8 million Americans who want to work and need to work go without work. Some protesters rushed the stage at the rally, causing it to end early. But his questions still remain. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter at laborhistoryin2.
Do you find it as charming as I do when some leisure class corporate chieftain whines that America's working stiffs are a bunch of slackers? We're hearing that now from Wall Street plutocrats, grumping that employees no longer have that old nose-to-the-grindstone, yes-boss work ethic of old-school capitalism that has created such fabulous wealth. Of course, wealth for whom and work for what are at the root of today's questioning of the old culture and structure of work. But the grumpers don't want to hear that, so they simply carp that America has gone soft. The latest high-flying scolder is Stephen Ratner, the Wall Street huckster who was fined $6 million in 2010 for running a kickback scheme and banned from investment banking for 2 years. But now he's back in the financial hustle, feeling free to chastise you for what he sees as your lack of hustle on the job. In particular, Steve is peeved at you work-from-home people, asserting with no actual evidence that you're not really working. He claims it will inevitably lead to a lower standard of living, a standard he measures strictly in money, not quality of life. Indeed, he says that your life should be work, pointing with envy to China's 996 system, a grinding ethic of expecting people to work from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. 6 days a week. Then, Ratner offers a grand solution to dissuade work-from-home arrangements: housing. Why, he asks, have a big majority of European workers already returned to their offices? Simple, he says. Most people there live in small apartments and houses, making stay-at-home work less comfortable. Voila! Put America's workers in tiny houses and office space will fill up. This is Jim Hightower saying, see, life is simple if you view it from the heights of Wall Street. Thank you, Steve. Now, go away.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
Evidently, Fox News, this is getting better and better every day with this Tucker Carlson thing. The blue check mark mafia on Twitter, they're all on board. Wherever Tucker goes next, they're going to be there. In fact, they were sharing a picture of him laughing playing golf. But I loved the Rolling Stone report that said evidently Fox News executives have a dossier. A dossier. There's a dossier. Evidently, it's got a bunch of dirt on Tucker Carlson that he'll stay in line. He's not going to do anything stupid. They've got the dirt. Wow. I mean, you couldn't write this stuff, to be honest. I mean, Netflix wouldn't pick this show up. Anyway, here to share some thoughts on the top stories of the day from India. Our good friend, former Ohio Congressman and political analyst, Bob Ney. Bob, thanks for taking time for us.
Namaste, Rick. How are you?
I am great. How are things in India?
Pretty good. They like us, and it's a world's largest democracy. It will exceed the population of China, I think, within a year or two. So things are pretty good. Let's see. The American hotel chains that are $220 a night are $53 a night here. How about that?
Wow.
Gas is high, but rest of the products have stayed relatively low. But that's because the buying power. I mean, if you raise the prices too much, they're simply not going to sell here. People aren't going to buy them.
Right.
So,
no, I know you like going there. I know that's your that's your
getaway.
Your mental health space. Let's use
yes.
that.
It is. It's pretty peaceful over here. I went to northern India with Ellen Ratner. Of course, who got me started on India, right?
Yeah.
Ellen Ratner, our friend Ellen.
Yeah, I miss
so
Ellen.
That's how 12 years ago.
Yeah. So any thoughts on the insanity that's going on here as Kevin McCarthy and the Republicans passed their what is it, the Limit, Save and Grow Act, as I've been saying, otherwise known as the Let's Shoot the Hostages Act. Any thoughts going on there of how insane we are?
Well, I mean, it's more insane what Fox News is happening for the spicy side of news with Fox, but this is creating its own problems. Here's a couple of observations I like to make on this. One, from the very start, what's the kind of main headline on this beyond what it does or beyond where it's going to go? Here's the main headline. I find this, if I were the speaker, I would find this troublesome, to say the least. 4 Republicans went against it. He only had 1 vote to spare. It was 217 to 215. Here's sort of the headlines is that McCarthy beats his caucus. They don't say that, but he defeats his caucus. He wins. That in itself, to make the observation that wow, McCarthy, he's a leader because he just got his own caucus to support the debt ceiling bill. In itself, what does that tell you, Rick? You're one of the best retail political people I know. It tells you he's got a problem.
Yeah, no, like I said at the beginning, and I said, if this bill had any chance of passing, and it doesn't, I say maybe 50 people vote for it.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Because it's that bad. When you're talking about a 22% cut to the VA, when you're talking about a 22% cut to the Social Security Administration, when you're talking these kind of massive draconian cuts, that's going to hurt your constituents, and they know that.
Right. So this was and for some people, by the way, this is in the Republican caucus, because I was in that caucus. This is going to serve as a safety net for them, believe it or not. Some people, Marjorie Taylor, Greene, Marjorie Taylor, 3 names. It's going to serve as a safety cushion for them because they're going to say, "Hey, I voted to do the right thing. Can't help what the rest of the system does."
Yeah.
So for some of them, it'll be that. For others, this is going to be a vote that, of course, will be used against them. Here's the number one thing about this piece of legislation, and it's not inherently what's in it, as much as it should never exist. You raise debt ceilings. I did it multiple times when Bush was president. We did it when Clinton was president. You raise or you don't raise debt ceilings. You don't do a budget in a debt ceiling bill. Why? This is such 101 politics, 101 government, 101 sociology. They are voting on what has already happened.
I know.
They're codifying what already went down last year.
And then taking on the arrows of what I argue a budget being a moral document and a document of priorities by sticking it to veterans and seniors.
Right. Yes, they did. So the substance in itself is not good with anything they've done with seniors and veterans, but also to attempt to do a budget in a debt ceiling bill it's politically bizarre. Why do you want to put your members on a mark here? Because some of the members that voted for this, now the 4 that didn't, of course, Matt Gaetz of Florida didn't vote for it because it didn't make people work 15 hours a day for $2 an hour, for food stamps. So that's Matt Gaetz' thinking. But why would you want to put your members on the line? Why would you want to vote for this when it's not even a budget process? You argue all these things out in the 11 or 13 appropriation bills, depends how they craft them. You argue all of these things out, Rick, as you know, the old way we used to do it, line by line, budget item by budget item, and an amendment process. This wasn't an amendment process on where you stood on veterans. This was just a cut.
Yeah.
So the whole thing's bizarre. And then on top of it, to have the story of how the speaker was finally able to maneuver, push, threaten, wrangle, whatever you want to call his own caucus to barely survive by 1 vote.
Yeah, but I keep coming back to the main point. He got them to vote for something that's never going to become law. It's never going to pass. The president said he's going to veto it, and I don't think it gets through the Senate, even if it does.
Right. This was a pre-budget statement to satisfy a lot of members of the Freedom Caucus. That's what this was, a pre-budget statement, because it should never have happened this way. So he was satisfying them. But the whole thing is going wrong from the substance of the bill, the cuts that it incurred without debate for the veterans and seniors, without debate. And people say, well, the bill was debated. No, these are complicated line items dealing with veterans and seniors and domestic spending and defense and everything else under the sun. And you don't do it in a bill that just says, oh, here's our numbers, here we go. It's not the way it's done in the debt ceiling bills.
Yeah, but you used a word
this also,
there.
by the way, gives no leverage to them with the president.
Yeah, none. I mean, there's nothing there.
None.
But you use the word complicated, which is a complicated word that they don't understand. I mean, I have friends who are like, governing is easy. Being a legislator is easy. No, it's a lot of hard work. It's a lot of compromise if you do it right. What we're seeing it being done wrong.
Correct. The whole process, you're right, Rick, is done wrong. When we did these budgets years back, we dug in, Republicans and Democrats dug in, line item by line item. How was this working in health and human services? How did this work in veterans? It allowed you actually to do some things like saying, hey, the VA bureaucratic system's not working fast enough. Let's put an amendment in there for them to speed up the process for veterans approval. You can do all those things if you do it in the right format, in the right way, which is the budget process.
Yeah, that takes too long.
So they have short-circuited all of that.
That takes too long. It's easy just to have a performative bill that we ram through so that we can go back to our podcast circuit and our F channel and say, we tried, but they stopped us.
Right. So this is a non-starter. Here we go. Where do we end up? Is this going to be high noon? And here's the other point. How do you now, as Republican caucus, how do you yield to do something, to avert the shutdown? Or you let the shutdown occur, and then it's sort of like Iraq. What was our exit plan? Oops, we didn't have one, And that's what's going to happen with the Republicans. If you don't have an exit plan, because they know this is not going to make it. They know it has no hope. So what's the exit plan? I don't know. Is the exit plan punt when we get there?
No, the exit plan is blame Biden. That's always the plan. In a little over a month and a half, or I guess not even a month and a half yet, there's a very real consequence at the end of this road. One that we've never done before. One, at least have we defaulted before?
Well, we shut down the government, which is different than a default.
Yeah, no, we
but
shut
as far
down.
As, right. But,
we've never actually pushed the button and gone nuclear option.
Right, and that's part of the problem, because a lot of people that are watching this that aren't up to speed on what DC is really doing will view this as, when this happens, or if it happens, or when, they'll view it as a, quote, shutdown. We've shut down before. I was part of that years back, and it's happened a couple times, but the default is completely different. And then that takes our rating. Also, I'll tell you who would be most happy if we defaulted is China.
Yeah.
They want their currency to be the one that rules, not the dollar. They would love it if we would default. It would play right into them trying to take over the currency. So, yes, this would be historic. And as they near towards it, again, if they don't have an exit plan, in normal cases, when I would do news over the last 12 years, right, and I would say, oh, here we go. Here's the hype. We're to the edge of the diving board. Do we shut down? Do we not shut down?
The bomb's ticking.
Right, here we go. Oh, the brave Senate and the brave House, and then they do a continuing resolution, and we all move on. And we all knew the drama was there. This time is different. You're right. This time it might be the real deal.
That's why I keep saying they want to shoot the hostage, just because it's never been done before. They want the chaos. And I've got people going, my 401k was so much better under Trump. If Republicans get their way right now, your 401k is going to look a lot worse.
There's the other thing. In the height of, our times now, and with continued gasoline increases, thank you, Saudi Arabia, and with inflation, the job market back and forth, good, a little mild. I mean, with all these factors going on, this is surely not the time to even tempt this.
Yeah.
Not at all.
It's crazy. Absolutely crazy. You're listening to the Rick Smith Show. We're here with Bob Ney, former Ohio Congressman, political analyst, sharing some thoughts from India. And thank you for calling in and sharing some thoughts.
Sure.
I want to get your thoughts before you go on what's going on in Florida with DeSantis and Disney. This just seems crazy on really kind of a bizarre level. You've got DeSantis, who's got some war on woke, whatever that is. I guess even his people say being decent. This war on decency, and taking it to Disney, and now Disney's filing a lawsuit against them. Any thoughts on how crazy this is?
Yeah, I haven't looked into all the details of the history of this relationship. When I say this relationship, Florida and Disney, friends of mine have pointed out you really ought to look into some of the past, ability of Disney to become its own zoning authority. There's all these intricacies. I guess it's sort of like comparable if you're in Ohio and you're a lawmaker and you're dealing with Honda, right?
Right.
Which came to Ohio, and it's a big deal in Ohio. This one, Walt Disney and Florida are so intertwined, and they've got this lawsuit. You're right. And they are alleging the Republican governor has waged a relentless campaign to weaponize. This is interesting. Disney's using this weaponized government power to use it over the company's head. And so this suit, I think, what this suit does, Rick, is it takes the whole behind the scenes and front scenes of the DeSantis-Disney feud, and it's taking it and it's putting it on a high-speed train, and it's throwing it right out front, because the lawsuit was filed the same day that the DeSantis-backed board moved to undo a development deal that it says Disney struck to show how powerful it is. So the board was going to undo that deal. So I think that this escalates everything that's been going on between DeSantis and Disney, and it throws it also right out front. Now, the question I ask in my mind is Disney, do they have clean hands like Judge Judy says, to do these suits? Why would a corporation like Disney throw this out right in front of the public unless, if you look at this, it probably looks better than he does if it comes public, right?
Yeah, I'm and I got to think that the laws on Disney's side. To a certain extent, because there's a part of me that goes, isn't this kind of singling out one entity? And I know there's some language in our Constitution about singling, in enforcing laws against individuals, or I don't know. There seems to be some gray area here that could be interesting to watch how it gets fought out.
True, and it's been back and forth over the years before DeSantis with Disney and how powerful should it be, how much should it do on its own zoning, how much Florida has to be involved with, and now the match that lit this was the fact that this DeSantis-backed board said to Disney, no, you can't do that deal. But the fight really began last year when Disney came out against the Florida bill, which is it's been dubbed "Don't Say Gay" bill. And they came out against it, and that absolutely, DeSantis went wild with that and went after Disney for speaking against the bill.
For me, it's going to be interesting because, Republicans believe corporations are people. And as I understand, 14th Amendment, gives you this equal protection clause that, they can't go after you and enforce. There's an interesting legal argument that I hope Disney pursues.
Well, they are, because the panel that DeSantis, created and put the people on board, because this was the last straw for Disney. Okay, the panel unanimously voted to declare Disney void and unenforceable for their development deal. Now, that development deal was approved before DeSantis replaced the Disney-approved board with his people.
Right.
So here you have this is striking. Here you have a board that's created to kind of have this oversight of Disney. Disney brings a proposal, a deal. The board says yes. DeSantis replaces board members, and the board then says what? No. And it was investing $17 billion over the next decade. $17 billion. Here's the stats, Rick. Over the next decade, this deal yielding 13,000 new jobs, right? On top of its more than 75 current cast members, these were permanent jobs. And so what the deal that was approved did then was to be disapproved. I don't see how Disney loses.
Well, maybe the Fox settlement won't be.
It might be small.
Yeah, well, we will see. Bob, I appreciate the time as always. Enjoy your time in India. I appreciate you coming around. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Our good friend Bob Ney. Seriously, this is going to be at least entertaining. And maybe it's one of the things that, wouldn't it be ironic if Disney is what brought DeSantis down? No, wait a minute. Not DeSantis brought himself down. Never mind. I'm not going to give Disney that credit. Quick break. Right back to wrap things up. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. In 1948, gold was discovered at John Suter's mill in California. As word spread, fortune seekers from all across the United States and across the world flocked to California in what became known as the Gold Rush. This included thousands from China. Many of the Chinese miners planned to return home with the gold they mined. As the easily accessible gold became more and more scarce due to the rush, resentment grew against foreign miners. In 1850, California passed the Foreign Miners Tax, charging those who came from outside the United States $20 a month. On this day in labor history, the year was 1862. The California legislature passed an act to further limit Chinese miners. The official title was an act to protect free white labor against competition with Chinese coolie labor and to discourage the immigration of the Chinese into the state of California. The word coolie referred to unskilled laborers from China and the Indian subcontinent. It was also often used as a derogatory term for Chinese people. The act implemented new taxes and licensing requirements on Chinese miners. The steep taxes led many Chinese to leave mining. Nearly 12,000 Chinese workers found employment with the construction of the Transcontinental Railroad. They performed extremely dangerous work laying the track through the Rocky Mountains. Yet, when the railroad project was completed, the Chinese workers were excluded from the celebrations. They were also not allowed to ride on the trains that crossed the continent for the first time. Anti-Chinese racism continued to grow. 20 years after the passage of the California law, the federal government passed the Chinese Exclusion Act. This law prohibited the immigration of Chinese labor. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com. Well, here's a shocker, and you knew this was going to happen. The MAGA movement, wildly unpopular, evidently. Latest NBC News poll finds that the MAGA folks' least popular group. Evidently, just 24% of Americans in this poll had a positive view, while 45% have a negative view. Republicans, however, when you look at those numbers, and this is surprising, 52% of Republicans had a positive view of the MAGA folk. That's interesting. As well as 53% of the people who define themselves, stake the flag in the ground as conservative. On the Trump front, Trump is wildly disliked by swing voters. Evidently, Biden has a 39-point lead with swing voters, 54-15. Because, they may dislike Biden, but they really dislike Trump. And this is one of those things where you just go, I know Democrats want Trump to run so that Biden can win, because we'll see. But it's interesting that Republicans want Trump even more now, which, great. Good for you. You keep pushing them. 63% in the most recent Marist poll say that they want Trump to have a second term, even with all of the stuff that's going on, even if he's guilty of the crimes. Yeah. My favorite quote of the day. Carrie Lake, the failed Arizona gubernatorial candidate, she said that Fox News is in bed with the left because they fired Tucker. How dare they? And speaking of Fox News, interesting little back and forth between Brian Kilmeade, who I can't stand, and Ronna McDaniel, who I don't trust. Evidently, while being interviewed by Kilmeade, McDaniel said President Trump never shies away from a debate, even though Trump's kind of leaning towards no debates. And Kilmeade goes, yes, he does. He skipped ours in 2016. He did? Well, he skipped one. I love that back and forth. And finally, another gun, another neighbor, this time a 79-year-old guy, angry with his neighbor for doing yard work. Yes, the guy had a leaf blower. He's out, leaf blowing, and the 79-year-old guy goes out with a gun, shoots him in the head. The 59-year-old dead, 79-year-old being carted away. And this, again, is another one of those moments where, explain to me how guns make us safer. And you go, but Rick, this is an isolated incident. Seems to be happening a lot lately. Old white guys angry about stuff. I don't know. There seems to be some kind of a weird pattern going on. Back in the old days, I remember people pulling out guns and, as kind of a threat thing. You should go away. You should stop. And but not really using them as often. Today, it seems like we're doing it a lot. It seems we're doing it a lot. And the question then is, what do you do with a 79-year-old guy? By the time he gets to trial, he's probably going to be dead anyway. What punishment is there? Now, this family going to lose a husband, a father, a breadwinner. Chaos. And for what? For what? Another senseless killing. And what's interesting is, I had someone email me the other day and say, the most dangerous places in the country? One of the most dangerous places, Memphis, Tennessee. I didn't know that. Tacoma, Washington. Didn't know that. What about Chicago? No. What about New York? No. Those are actually fairly safe places. In fact, red states are some of the most dangerous places in the country, they tell me. And they're the ones who have the guns. And again, I keep asking that question. When do we get to peak safety again? When do we get the neighbors not shooting each other? I know, good guy with a gun. Want to hear your thoughts? Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. You got anything on your mind? Something I said got under your skin? Angry hate emails, I answer first. If you miss any portion of the program, make sure you grab the podcast. Wherever you find your favorite podcasts, you'll find ours. Appreciate you tuning in. We'll see you back here next time.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Email Rick at rick@thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working